March 11th, 1945. 8:07 p.m., Ulithi Lagoon, Caroline Islands. On the hangar deck of USS Randolph, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the damp, metallic scent of the sea. Sailors barely out of their teens, some with grease still under their fingernails, sit shoulder to shoulder on benches and crates, letting a movie wash the war off their faces for just 1 hour. Laughter ripples through the darkened space. Then the ship shudders. Not the gentle vibration of engines. Randolph is anchored, her screws still. This is a violent, bone deep that slams through steel like a fist through paper. The lights blink, die, and in the sudden darkness you can almost feel the fear arrive before the sound does. A heartbeat later, the explosion hits. A roar so loud it becomes physical. A pressure wave that punches the breath from chests, throws men off their seats, and turns the air into burning fragments. Somewhere above them, on the starboard quarter, a twin-engine Japanese bomber has found the carrier's stern just below the flight deck and delivered its 800-kilogram bomb like a final sentence. In the next moments, there is no movie, no laughter, only shouting, running feet, the harsh bark of orders, and the unmistakable smell of aviation fuel and scorch paint is sweet, poisonous, and everywhere. Damage control parties sprint into the smoke, wearing helmets that catch the emergency lighting in brief, flickering flashes. You can almost see it like a nightmare in still frames. A sailor dragging a friend who isn't moving, boots sliding on a deck slick with firefighting water. Another man claws at a hatch wheel that won't turn because the frame is bent by blast. Above, on the flight deck, the night is lit by a jagged orange wound. Flames lick at warped metal. The silhouettes of parked aircraft American birds meant for Okinawa burn like paper. And still the ship doesn't sink. Still the ship doesn't roll over and die. Randolph is an Essex-class carrier, a floating city of steel, commanded by Captain Felix Baker. But in this moment, the ship's true commander is something else entirely. The brutal instinct of men refusing to let their home become a grave. "Fire party forward," someone screams. Hose teams move. In the chaos, you can hear the small sounds too, the ones that never make it into official reports. The wet slap of boots, the clatter of drop tools, the choking cough of smoke in lungs, a voice somewhere repeating a name, over and over, like saying it might keep the person alive. Out across the lagoon, the night watches the carrier burn. Ulithi is supposed to be safe. It's a secret anchorage so distant that, on paper, Japanese aircraft shouldn't even reach it. The lagoon is enormous calm, black water ringed by coral and tiny islands filled with the silhouettes of American power. Carriers, oilers, repair ships, supply vessels, a fleet so large it feels less like an armada and more like a moving nation. And yet tonight, Japan has reached into the dark and landed a blow. Thousands of miles away, earlier that day, Kanoya airfield on Kyushu had been a place of oil stains and cold wind, of mechanics swearing under their breath and pilots staring too long at the ground. The men assigned to the long-range attack had watched other units go out and not come back. They'd watched fuel become precious, spare parts become mythical, meals become smaller, more careful, less taste, more necessity. Now, they were told there was a way to strike back. One last reach, one long flight over open ocean toward the American carriers at anchor. And when the engines of the Yokosuka P-1Y-1 France's bombers began to howl on the runway, you could almost feel the desperation behind the plan. Not confidence, not superiority. Need. Because when you're losing, you don't look for fair fights. You look for miracles. Back at Ulithi, the miracle doesn't arrive for Japan. What arrives is the American answer to shock, repair. By the time the flames are beaten down and the smoke thins, the carrier's stern is ripped open like a can. The damage is severe enough that some officers believe Randolph will have to limp all the way back across the Pacific to a major shipyard, disappearing from the war for months. But Ulithi is not just an anchorage. Ulithi is a workshop, a floating city of logistics where the war is fed, fueled, patched, and pushed forward again. A repair ship USS Jason edges alongside. Floodlights turn the night into a harsh white stage. Welders appear like ghosts in masks, their torches bright as lightning. Steel plates are measured, cut, hauled, fitted. Men work until their hands shake. Then they keep working. Because the war doesn't pause for funerals. And it doesn't pause for exhaustion. You can almost taste the irony in the air. Japan has flown to the edge of possibility to cripple an American carrier only to discover that in this lagoon, America can perform surgery on a wounded giant and send it back into battle. But repairing a battleship was just physics. What the U.S. Navy did next was psychological warfare, wrapped in sugar. But even that isn't the strangest thing drifting into Ulithi. Not yet. 5 days after the attack March 16th, the horizon shifts. A shape appears. It's not sleek. It's not fast. It's a gray, concrete block towed by a tugboat. Sailors point. They laugh until they hear the rumor. This isn't a cargo ship. It's the USS Hydrogen. Inside is an Arctic freezer, 15 degrees below zero. While men outside sweat in the tropics, the crew inside wears parkas. But they aren't guarding ammo. They are guarding the churners. 10 gallons. Every 7 minutes. Vanilla. Chocolate. Strawberry. A floating factory dedicated to one thing. Joy. Shift after shift. Able to hold 2,000 gallons of frozen sweetness in its cold belly. In the middle of the Pacific War. In a lagoon where ships go out to kill and come back bleeding. As the barge settles into its mooring and the machinery inside begins to wake, a thought spreads through the fleet quiet at first, then undeniable. If America can afford to bring ice cream here, what else can it afford? The first ice cream doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It arrives the way everything important arrives out here quietly, in the hands of tired men who do not waste motion. A motor whaleboat noses up the carrier's accommodation ladder, its wake slapping against Randolph's scar hull. In the boat is a petty officer from the mess department, steadying a lidded metal can like it's ammunition, because to the men who have been breathing smoke and cordite for months, it might as well be. A bosun's mate leans over the rail, squints down at the cargo. No kidding, he mutters. The lid is pried up. Cold spills out like fog. A faint smell, sweet dairy. Vanilla. So out of place in a war zone that for a second it doesn't register as real. You can almost see the moment the sailors' brains catch up to what their senses are telling them. Ice cream. In the Pacific. After a kamikaze strike. After bodies zipped into canvas and carried away without ceremony. Because there isn't time. A line forms without orders. Men try to pretend they're not eager. They fail. The first sailor takes a spoonful and freezes just for an instant as the cold hits his tongue. His eyes flick up, not at the petty officer, not at the deck, but at nothing in particular, like his mind has been yanked somewhere else, somewhere impossibly normal. A porch back home, a soda fountain, a summer that didn't smell like fuel. He swallows. Then he laughs at one sharp bark that doesn't belong to him anymore, like it came from the boy he used to be. Holy, it's real. A few men clap him on the shoulder. Someone calls him a lucky bastard. Someone else says, too quietly, my kid sister used to make it like this. Then a sailor at the back of the line says something that lands harder than any joke. If we got ice cream. He looks past the ship toward the lagoon, where repair ships glow under floodlights and the silhouettes of oilers sit like dark mountains. We're not losing. No one argues, because every man there understands what the ice cream really is. not dessert, a message. Out on the lagoon, the barge itself sits low and stubborn, a blunt concrete rectangle moored among tankers, tenders, and floating dry docks. Its name isn't painted in heroic letters. It isn't meant to be admired. It is meant to work. It looked like a floating tomb, but inside, it held a secret that cost $1 million and tasted like home. Inside, the air sits at a painful 15 degrees Fahrenheit. While men outside sweat in the tropical heat, the crew here moves through a frozen fog, managing a floating pantry the size of a small town. 1,500 tons of meat, 500 tons of veggies. And in the center of it all, the machine that matters most churns with relentless confidence, 10 gallons of vanilla and chocolate every 7 minutes. It is a factory line of comfort in a sea of violence. And in March of 1945, capability was a weapon. To the commanders looking at maps, this barge isn't a joke. It's maintenance. Just like replacing a bearing in an engine or welding a hull, morale is a fuel that needs to be refilled. They know that a soldier who stares too long at nothing, who jumps at harmless sounds, is a soldier who will break. So when the ice cream barge arrives at Ulithi, it isn't ridiculous. It is a calculated military move. Keep the machine running, keep the men running. This is what a losing war looks like. One side digs for roots, the other builds a factory for dessert. While Americans line up for scoops of frozen sweetness, the reality just a few hundred miles away is a different universe. On a bypassed island, a Japanese soldier digs for a root the thickness of his thumb, staring at it like it's a treasure. He fights hunger while his enemy fights brain freeze. Rumors of the ice cream ship drift across the lines, and for the Japanese command, it's not just absurd, it's terrifying. It proves that the enemy isn't just winning. They are so well supplied they can afford to ship luxury to the front lines. On a bypassed Japanese-held island, a soldier digs in the dirt with a bayonet, searching for something edible. His uniform hangs loose on his frame. The heat presses down, and there is no relief, no cold room, no freezer, no endless supply line. He finds a root the thickness of his thumb and stares at it like it might be a trick. A few miles away in Japan itself, a mother stirs a pot that smells like thin rice and boiled greens, trying to make it feel like a meal. She measures out portions with the careful precision of someone who understands hunger isn't emotion anymore, it's arithmetic. Even in the Imperial Navy, once proud and well-fed, the diet shrinks with the empire. Less rice, less protein, more substitutes, more empty space in the stomach that never fully goes away. By 1945, Japan is fighting with courage, yes, but also with exhaustion, with scarcity, with the slow, humiliating knowledge that the enemy can do things you cannot. And then, through rumor, through intercepted chatter, through the bitter talk of men who have seen American ships up close, comes a story so absurd it almost sounds like propaganda. The Americans have a ship that makes ice cream, not for officers, for everyone. Back on Randolph, the ice cream is gone in minutes. Men lick spoons clean like kids, then immediately pretend they didn't. The laughter lingers longer than the taste. For a few hours, the war loosens its grip, but wars don't allow comfort without payment. As the night deepens, a boatswain's pipe shrills across the deck. A voice over the loudspeaker cuts through the ship's brief. Stolen peace. Now hear this, all hands stand by. Task force getting underway. Men stop talking. Faces harden. Hands tighten around mugs and railings. In the darkness of Ulithi Lagoon, engines begin to turn, because the fleet is leaving for Okinawa. And somewhere in the middle of that vast, moving armada fuel, ammunition, planes, men towed behind tugs like a secret. The ice cream barge is coming too. The first sign that the ice cream ship is truly part of the war effort is how it moves. not with flags and fanfare, with a tow line in the black water beyond Ulithi's reef. A tug pulls steady and slow, its stern light trembling on the waves. Behind it drifts a blunt, concrete mass low in the water, ugly as a warehouse, a BRL, barge refrigerated large, carrying more frozen food than some cities see in a month, and a factory inside it that makes ice cream like it's making ammunition. The sailors who spot it from the decks of departing ships call out the name painted on the side and laugh at the absurdity of it. USS Hydrogen. A weapon named like a chemistry lesson. It seems like a joke until you notice the escort. A destroyer slides along the barge's flank at a respectful distance, gray hull cutting the sea, radar turning, lookout scanning the horizon. Because even a desert factory deserves protection when it's keeping an army spirit from collapsing. And the ocean doesn't care what you're carrying. A torpedo doesn't ask if the cargo is bombs or ice cream. Inside Hydrogen, the air is so cold it hurts. The men working the refrigeration spaces move like they've been issued a different climate. Their breath fogs. Their fingers stiffen around valves. The temperature sits down around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough to keep meat frozen indefinitely, cold enough to turn sweat into an ache. The ship stores 1,500 tons of frozen meat and 500 tons of refrigerated vegetables, eggs, and dairy in a floating pantry the size of a small town. And in a compartment that feels almost sacred, the ice cream machine churns with relentless confidence. 10 gallons every 7 minutes. Over and over, the churner hums. The mix thickens. The smell of vanilla, chocolate spreads through steel corridors where the normal perfume is diesel, sweat, and paint. A mess specialist leans close, checking the flow like he's sighting a gun. He doesn't say out loud, but you can see it in his eyes. If we can do this out here, what can't we do? By late March, the Pacific is no longer a distant battlefield. It is tightening around Japan like a fist. Operation Iceberg is underway in Okinawa, the last stepping stone before the home islands. The fleet moves west in great, disciplined lines, carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers. Behind them, the support world follows oilers, ammunition ships, repair ships, and a strange new class of morale weapon that churns sweetness in the tropics. Out on the fast carriers, the tempo turns brutal. Flight decks roar from dawn to nightfall as F-6F Hellcats and SB-2C Helldivers launch into gray sky, returning with bullet holes and the sour smell of burnt oil. The sea is crowded with threats. Submarines below, aircraft above, and the invisible pressure of a nation fighting on the edge of extinction. And then the Kamikazes come. Not all at once. Not in a neat wave. They come like storms unpredictable, screaming out of cloud cover, aiming not for victory but for impact. A destroyer's 5-inch guns hammer the air. Oerlikons chatter. Tracers stitch the sky. A plane cartwheels into the sea, trailing flame, and a second one punches into a ship's deck with the sound of tearing metal and a violence that makes men taste copper. Afterward, there's always the same scene. A smoke-stained sailor, sitting with his back against the bulkhead, hands shaking, eyes unfocused. Somebody saying, "You all right?" And not waiting for the answer because there's another alarm. Morale out here isn't a slogan. It's a thin thread. And then, in the middle of all that steel and fire, a small boat comes alongside. A crewman on the destroyer's rail looks down and sees insulated containers being lifted by rope sling, careful as if they're carrying wounded men. He watches it and gets set down on deck. The lid is cracked. Cold breath spills out. He blinks like his brain doesn't believe his eyes. Is that? Someone grins, the kind of grin that only appears when a man has nothing left and then receives something he didn't know he needed. Ice cream. The word moves through the ship like electricity. Not because it's food, because it's proof. Proof that whatever hell they're sailing into, the system behind them is still intact, still confident, still able to spend effort on something that has nothing to do with killing, only with enduring. Men eat standing up because there's nowhere to sit. A sailor takes a spoonful, closes his eyes, and you can almost see him leave the Pacific for half a second. Somewhere else, somewhere safe, somewhere with a kitchen light on and a radio playing softly in the background. Then the general alarm sounds again, and he opens his eyes, wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, and runs back to his station. Ice cream doesn't make you immortal. It makes you willing. On Okinawa, the Japanese defenders have their own logistics. It's called hunger. In caves near Shuri, men of the 32nd Army ration rice into miserable portions. Water is carried in stolen cans. Ammunition is counted and recounted like prayer beads. The air is wet, sour, and close. You can almost feel it on your skin, humidity mixed with the stink of unwashed bodies, and earth that never dries. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima and his chief of staff, Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, are fighting a different kind of battle. Not for the beach, for time. They know they cannot throw the Americans back into the sea. So they aim to bleed them, grind them, make them sick of dying on foreign soil, break their morale, make them question why they're here. But the problem with that plan becomes clear in small, humiliating details. A captured American position yields not empty tins in desperation, but wrappers and cartons, evidence of food that arrived reliably enough to be wasted. Japanese soldiers whisper about it, disbelief turning into bitterness. Even if they don't see the ice cream itself, they see the meaning of it. The enemy is not straining. The enemy is not starving. The enemy can afford comfort, and that thought is corrosive, because what do you do to an opponent you cannot exhaust? In the dim light of the command cave, Yahara listens to reports of casualties, bombardments, movements offshore. Somewhere outside, American naval guns thunder, shaking dust from the ceiling like falling snow. A staff officer offers him a bowl. Rice, thin and gray. He takes it because he has to. And for a moment, as he chews, the distant thunder becomes something else in his imagination. The steady churn of an American machine that produces not just shells and ships, but ice cream 8,000 miles from home. He swallows. His eyes harden. Because if morale is a battlefield, America has brought reinforcements there too. And the next question hangs in the damp air like a ghost. If they can't be starved, how do you stop them? Out on the Okinawa station, the sea is never truly quiet. Even on a calm morning, the horizon trembles with movement destroyers pacing like guard dogs, carriers turning into the wind, oilers sliding in close for refueling, while men on deck throw lines with the accuracy of muscle memory. And above it all, the sky is watchful. The radar scope glows green in the dim of the Combat Information Center. A blip appears. Then another. A voice sharpens. Bogies closing fast. You can almost feel the ship tighten around its crew. Helmets go on. Hands find railings, gun grips, ready ammunition. The air changes. It becomes thin and electric, like the seconds before a fistfight. The first kamikaze comes out of cloud cover, so suddenly that the gunners barely have time to track it. The plane is too low, too fast, skipping along the sea like a stone. Tracers reach for it, white streaks snapping past the cockpit. The pilot never flinches. There's no evasive weave, no attempt to live, only a straight line into the American formation. A destroyer erupts with gunfire. The plane takes hits, pieces tearing away, but it keeps coming. You can see it close enough to make out the shape of the canopy, the flash of the engine cowling. Then it slams into the water shore of its target and explodes anyway, spraying the sea with flame, shrapnel, and a wave of heat that rolls across the nearest ship's deck like opening an oven door. Men exhale, not relief exactly, just the permission to breathe again. And the instant the danger passes, the fleet does what it always does. It resets. Gun crews reload. Damage control checks hoses and fittings. Pilots climb back into cockpits. Flight deck crews drag the next aircraft into position, like this is a factory line, and the product is survival. Somewhere in the middle of it, a small boat comes alongside. No sirens, no speeches, just insulated containers being hoisted aboard. A mess specialist cracks a lid, and cold spills out in a white breath. Ice cream. Again. A sailor takes one spoonful and shakes his head slowly, as if laughing would waste oxygen. Unreal, he whispers. He's not thinking about dessert. He's thinking about what it means that, even here under constant attack, within reach of Japan's dying fury, America can still deliver this. Not because it's necessary, because it's possible. And possibility is contagious. It jumps from man to man like warmth. A few minutes later, the general alarm shrieks again. Men drop spoons. They run, not dragging their feet, not staring into space. Running like the war hasn't hollowed them out, because for a moment, the ice cream reminded them that they are not just targets on the ocean. They are part of something enormous behind them, something that will not break. In Okinawa, in the caves, there is no cold. There's only damp heat that clings to skin and uniforms and weapons. The air tastes of Earth's sweat, smoke, and the sour edge of sickness. A Japanese infantryman, his cheeks sunken, his eyes too bright, chews a strip of something that used to be food and tries not to gag. Outside, American naval guns hammer the island day and night. The ground shivers with each impact, dust drifting down from the ceiling like gray snow. A runner arrives with news from the lines. Another unit has been pushed back. Another cave has been sealed with flame. Another position is gone. In the corner, a soldier holds something he shouldn't have. A scrap of American packaging, taken from a dead man's pocket. The paper is stained and soft from humidity, but you can still see the colors, the neat printing. Something about it feels obscene, clean, modern, confident. He rubs the paper between his fingers. Not because it's useful, but because it proves a truth he can't escape. The Americans are not suffering the way they are. They are not starving. They are not shrinking. They are arriving with more men, more shells, more aircraft, and somehow, impossibly, with comforts that belong to a world that ended for Japan years ago. It isn't just hunger that eats Japanese morale. It's humiliation, because courage can survive hunger for a time, but it struggles to survive the realization that the enemy's life is still fuller, that the enemy can afford sweetness while you count grains of rice. By the summer of 1945, the rumors were everywhere, whispered among exhausted defenders with a bitterness that sounded like disbelief. America has floating dry docks, floating machine shops, and somewhere out there, floating ice cream. To a starving soldier, it is a cruel story. To a Japanese officer, it suggests the impossible, that the enemy's morale is being manufactured and delivered like ammunition. The secret weapon wasn't sugar or milk. It was an industrial spine, so thick it could bend the laws of distance.